I grew up knowing Lucas, mostly from a distance. We were from the same neighborhood, and our paths often crossed on the street, but our worlds were vastly different. I came from a simple family. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Lucas, on the other hand, was part of the well-known Grayson family, who owned the largest company in town. Everyone knew them, and almost everyone envied them. One day, as I was walking home from my job at the local grocery store, Lucas approached me. It was unexpected. We barely spoke before this. "Hey, Tiffany," he greeted, flashing a smile that made many girls in our town go weak in the knees. "Hi, Lucas," I replied, a bit surprised. "How are you?" "Good, thanks. Look, I was wondering if you'd like to grab a coffee tomorrow." The invite took me off guard. "Coffee? With you?" "Yeah, I mean, we've known each other for years, but never really talked. I'd like to change that. What do you say?" I hesitated, then said, "All right, why not?" From that day, things moved quickly. Our coffee date turned into dinners, movie nights, and long walks. We spent days getting to know each other. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized we had a lot in common. One evening, as we were walking by the river, Lucas turned to me and said, "Tiffany, these past few weeks with you have been amazing. I've never felt this way about anyone before." I looked up at him. "Lucas, this is all so new to me. I never expected any of this." He took my hands in his. "Neither did I, but now that we're here, I don't want to let you go." Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Before I knew it, Lucas was on one knee holding out a simple ring. "Tiffany, will you marry me?" Tears filled my eyes. "Yes, Lucas. Yes, I will." The news of our engagement spread quickly. Everyone was surprised. No one saw it coming. But here we were, two people from different worlds, finding love in the most unexpected place. As the wedding preparations began, I couldn't help but feel like I was living in a dream. The Grayson family was beyond supportive. They welcomed me with open arms, especially Lucas's mother, Mrs. Harriet Grayson. She was thrilled about our union and took charge of most of the wedding arrangements. "Tiffany," she said to me one day, "I want you to have the best wedding. You're going to be a Grayson now." "Thank you, Mrs. Grayson. I never imagined any of this," I replied, overwhelmed. "You deserve it, dear. Lucas is lucky to have you." The big day arrived sooner than we expected. As I stood at the altar, looking at Lucas, I felt grateful for this unexpected turn my life had taken. Little did I know, things were about to change in ways I could never have anticipated. The move to our new home was swift, just days after our wedding. It was a quaint, charming place, not too large, with a hint of vintage charm. Lucas had picked it out, saying it was perfect for us to start our life together. From the moment we stepped in, I felt an unexpected chill, not from the house itself, but from Lucas. The warmth he had exuded throughout our courtship seemed to evaporate. Our rooms echoed with silence, broken only by the mundane conversations about household chores or grocery lists. One evening, after setting up the dinner table, I tried initiating a light conversation. "The house feels cozy, doesn't it? We can maybe get some plants for the balcony?" Lucas, who was absorbed in some paperwork, merely grunted in reply. Sensing his detachment, I attempted to bridge the distance. "Lucas, is everything okay?" He looked up, seemingly irritated. "Yes, why wouldn't it be?" "I just feel you've been distant since we moved in." I hesitated. "Did I do something wrong?" He sighed heavily, avoiding eye contact. "It's nothing. I'm just busy with work." "But you're always here, at home, with me," I pointed out, trying to understand his sudden change. Lucas's voice hardened. "Look, Tiffany, I have a lot on my mind. The marriage, the house, my work responsibilities. It's all a bit overwhelming." I felt a pang in my heart. "I thought we were in this together," I murmured. He didn't respond, just got up and headed to our bedroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the now cold dinner. The days that followed were no different. Mornings were a hurried affair, with Lucas often leaving before I was even fully awake. Evenings were cold and silent. I tried engaging him, suggesting we go out or inviting friends over, but he always had an excuse. Mrs. Harriet Grayson, during one of her visits, sensed the tension. "Tiffany," she whispered, pulling me aside. "Is everything okay between you two?" I bit my lip, trying to hold back tears. "I don't know, Mrs. Grayson. He's changed." She gave my hand a comforting squeeze. "Give it time, dear. Marriage is a big step. Perhaps he's just adjusting." I nodded, but deep down, doubts were setting in. Was this how my married life was going to be? In the shadow of Lucas's coldness? Determined to find answers, I decided to take matters into my own hands. Days turned into weeks, and the cold atmosphere in our home continued. The initial days of trying to break the ice with Lucas had led to a routine of silence. I'd find myself often staring at the wall, counting the minutes until he'd return home. But when he did, it was as if I was living with a stranger. One evening, I decided to cook his favorite meal, hoping it might cheer him up or at least get him to talk. As I set the table, I thought of our earlier days and how he'd compliment my cooking. Now, the very idea of him sitting to eat with me seemed like a distant dream. Lucas walked in later than usual. I greeted him with a hesitant smile. "Hey, I made your favorite tonight." He glanced at the table and then at me. "I ate out." "Oh," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." There was a moment of silence. "Lucas," I started, my voice firm, "we need to talk." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Not now, Tiffany." "When then? You've been distant for weeks. I don't even know what's going on in your life anymore." Lucas looked at me, his face expressionless. "It's just work. There's a lot of pressure." I nodded slowly. "But we used to talk, Lucas. We used to share. Now I feel like I'm living with a ghost." Lucas looked away, not meeting my eyes. "I need some space, Tiffany." The words felt like a blow. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Space? We live together, Lucas. We're married. If there's a problem, we should be facing it together." He didn't reply, just turned and headed towards our bedroom, leaving me standing there, lost and confused. The next morning, I woke up to find him already gone. The bed was neatly made, and a note lay on the pillow next to mine. "Had to leave early. Don't wait up." Days passed, and the pattern continued. Lucas would leave early and return late, often after I'd gone to bed. We became like two ships passing in the night, with barely any interaction. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room flipping through an old photo album, tears streamed down my face. Pictures of our early days, our smiles, our closeness, seemed like memories from another lifetime. Mrs. Grayson dropped by unannounced. Noticing my tears, she sat next to me, concern evident on her face. "Tiffany, what's going on?" Wiping my tears, I replied, "It's Lucas, Mrs. Grayson. He's changed. I feel so alone." She looked at the pictures and then at me. "Marriage has its ups and downs, dear, but communication is key." I nodded. "I've tried talking to him, but he shuts me out." Mrs. Grayson patted my hand gently. "Then maybe it's time to take a different approach. Find out what's really bothering him." Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "You're right. I need to get to the bottom of this." Determined to uncover the mystery behind Lucas's behavior, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands. The nights were the hardest. Alone in the vast mansion, I'd often find myself waiting for Lucas to walk through the door. But more often than not, the ticking of the clock was the only sound that kept me company. One evening, after yet another night alone, desperation took over. I decided to call Mrs. Grayson. Perhaps she knew something I didn't. Maybe she could talk some sense into Lucas. "Mrs. Grayson?" I started hesitantly, when she picked up the phone. "It's Tiffany. I was hoping to speak with you about Lucas." There was a brief pause. Then, in a softer tone, she replied, "Oh, Tiffany, what's the matter?" Taking a deep breath, I confessed, "Lucas hasn't been coming home. He's hardly ever here, and I don't know what to do." To my surprise, her tone shifted instantly. "Tiffany, my son has responsibilities, bigger than you might understand. He's managing a massive company, trying to maintain our family's legacy." Stammering, I tried to explain. "I understand, but he doesn't come home. At all. Nights are so lonely." Mrs. Grayson's voice hardened. "You knew what you were getting into when you married him. You need to adjust and be grateful for the life he's providing you." Tears filled my eyes. "I just want our marriage to be how I imagined." There was a cold silence. Then she said, "Lucas mentioned you might be difficult, always wanting more. You should be thankful for what you have, Tiffany." The conversation ended shortly after, leaving me even more bewildered and alone. Whatever Lucas had told his mother had painted me in a terrible light. What was he hiding? Why was he driving this wedge between his family and me? It was clear that I needed answers, and I was determined to find them. I enlisted the help of an old classmate, David, now a private detective. Within days, he presented me with photos that made my heart sink. Days turned into nights, and my sense of isolation grew. Each evening felt like an echo of the previous one. I'd walk through the grand halls, touching the expensive decor, but feeling more disconnected than ever. One gloomy afternoon, while I sat in the drawing room staring blankly at the pouring rain outside, my phone vibrated. It was an unfamiliar number. "Hello?" I said hesitantly. "Tiffany, dear, it's Aunt Margaret, Lucas's aunt." Surprised, I replied, "Oh, hello, Aunt Margaret. It's nice to hear from you." Her voice was warm, but there was a hint of concern. "I just wanted to check in and see how you were feeling, dear. It's been so long since our last chat." I was puzzled. "I'm fine, thank you. Why do you ask?" She hesitated, then said, "Well, Lucas mentioned you'd been struggling lately. He said you'd been having a tough time adjusting and dealing with some personal health issues." I blinked in confusion. "Health issues?" Aunt Margaret continued. "Yes, he mentioned you were battling severe depression and that he's been so worried about you." The weight of realization hit me. This was the story Lucas was spinning to his family. I felt a mix of anger and disbelief. I don't know where he got that from, Aunt Margaret. I've been lonely, yes, but I'm not suffering from depression." Aunt Margaret sounded genuinely surprised. "Oh, well, he seemed so concerned. He even said he was getting you the best treatment and medications." My mind raced. Not only had Lucas been lying about his whereabouts, but he'd also been crafting an elaborate tale about my supposed condition to his family. Trying to keep my composure, I said, "Thank you for your concern, Aunt Margaret. I'll have to talk to Lucas about this." Before we ended the call, she added, "Well, since you're feeling better, I'd love for you to come to my birthday celebration next week. I'm inviting close family, and it would be lovely to see you." "Of course," I replied, trying to mask the turmoil inside me. "I'd love to." Once the call ended, my emotions were a whirlwind. Lucas's deceit ran deeper than I'd imagined. But Aunt Margaret's invitation gave me an idea. It would be the perfect place to confront him, surrounded by the very family he'd lied to. As I pondered my next moves, I felt a newfound determination. Lucas had woven a web of lies, but I was ready to expose the truth. The festive atmosphere of Aunt Margaret's birthday celebration was in full swing when I decided it was time. As guests laughed and chatted, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the confrontation. Lucas stood amidst a group, laughing at some joke, appearing to be the perfect son and husband. I approached him, my hands clutching the jars of medication, each one empty. The murmurs of the gathering dimmed as all eyes turned to us. With every step, my resolve hardened. "Lucas," I said, my voice loud enough to command the attention of the room. I placed the medicine jars in front of him, their labels glaringly evident. He glanced at them, his laughter fading, confusion clouding his eyes. "What's this?" he asked, his tone flippant. "These are the medications I'm supposedly on," I responded. "The ones you've been telling everyone you've been buying for me." He stared at them, genuinely puzzled. "Why are you showing me these?" He picked up one jar, examining it before carelessly tossing it onto the floor. "This," I said, pointing at the shattered jar, "is how much you know about my so-called illness. You can't even recognize the medication you claim to buy for me." Whispers swept through the room as realization dawned on the guests. The air grew thick with tension. Lucas's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but his eyes betrayed his panic. Aunt Margaret stepped forward, her face a mask of shock and anger. "Lucas, is this true? Have you been lying to us about Tiffany's health?" He couldn't respond, cornered by the weight of his deceit. The room was a sea of accusing eyes, each one demanding answers. "I trusted you, Lucas," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "Not only did you betray me, but you also lied to your family, to everyone who cared about us." He looked down, unable to meet anyone's gaze. The room remained silent, the weight of the revelation sinking in. All the pretense, the stories, the lies, they had finally caught up with him. With the shattered medicine jar as the only sound, the room was thick with tension. Lucas had gone pale, his confident facade crumbled. I wasn't done, though. With one last ace up my sleeve, I took out the pictures David had given me. Pictures that showed Lucas with a woman who wasn't me. "Recognize her?" I asked, handing the pictures to Aunt Margaret, who was closest to me. She looked at them, her eyes widening with recognition and dismay. "Oh no, Lucas, not her," she murmured, more to herself than to anyone else. Lucas shifted uncomfortably, looking like a deer caught in headlights. "What is it, Aunt Maggie?" one of the cousins, Sarah, asked. Aunt Margaret looked up, her expression grave. "This is Isabella Travers. She's well known in our community, for all the wrong reasons." I felt a chill. The way Aunt Margaret said it, it seemed this Isabella had a history with the family. Lucas's mother, Mrs. Grayson, approached and took a look at the photos. The color drained from her face. "I thought you were done with her after—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I can't believe you'd do this to Tiffany, to all of us." Lucas was cornered, looking between the two women with panic evident in his eyes. "Mom, it's not what you think," he started, but Aunt Margaret interrupted him. "We all warned you about her years ago, Lucas. We thought marrying Tiffany would have set you on the right path. Isabella is nothing but trouble." Lucas seemed to shrink, his posture slouched and defeated. "It's not like that. I mean, it started out, but it's complicated." "Complicated?" I echoed, my voice sharp. "You marry me, lie about my health, and all the while you're with her? Explain that complication to me." Lucas opened his mouth, then closed it, no words coming out. He looked broken, defeated, but I felt no sympathy. He had deceived everyone, and it was time for the truth. Aunt Margaret, visibly upset, handed the photos back to me. "Tiffany, I'm so sorry," she said. "You deserve so much better than this." I nodded, looking at the pictures. "Thank you, Aunt Maggie. All I wanted was the truth." The room was filled with murmured conversations as the party guests processed the revelations. Lucas looked around. No friends in sight, no allies to defend him. He had played his games, and now he was facing the consequences. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. The truth was out, and I was ready to move forward, away from the lies and deceit that had become my life. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty outside stood in stark contrast to the turmoil that had just occurred inside the Grayson household. I sat on the porch steps, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. David approached me, his usual confident demeanor replaced with genuine concern.
"Are you okay?"
he asked. I looked up, forcing a smile.
"I will be. Thanks for everything, David. Without you, I'd still be in the dark."
He sat down next to me. "I just wish I could have done more. No one should go through what you did." I sighed. It's done now. All that's left is to move forward. He looked out towards the horizon. "What will you do now?" "I haven't decided," I replied. "But I know I can't stay here. I need a fresh start somewhere away from all this." David nodded. "You deserve happiness, Tiffany. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I smiled, feeling a warmth despite the situation. "Thank you, David." Inside, the murmur of voices continued. Some of the family were angry, some confused, but the truth was out, and everyone knew it. I had no intentions of going back inside. Not now, not ever. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a message from Mrs. Grayson. "I'm so sorry for what happened. We will refuse Lucas financial support. He can forget about inheriting the family company. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Take care of yourself." I replied with a simple "thank you" and put the phone back in my pocket. After a while, David stood up. "I should get going. If you ever need anything, Tiffany, just call, okay?" I nodded. "I will. Thanks again, David." He smiled, patting my shoulder reassuringly, and walked away. The house behind me felt cold, unwelcoming. The only thing tying me to it was the memories, and now they were all tainted. The next morning, I packed up my belongings, leaving behind everything that reminded me of Lucas and the life I thought I had. Aunt Margaret offered to help, but I declined. This was something I had to do alone. As I drove away, I didn't look back. The house, Lucas, the lies, they were all behind me. Ahead lay a new journey, new beginnings, and a chance at happiness. The end was also a new beginning. I knew challenges awaited, but I also knew I was strong enough to face them. With each mile I put between myself and the past, the brighter my future looked. The road ahead was open, and I was ready to embark on my next adventure, free from the shadows of deceit. And as I drove into the rising sun, I felt a sense of hope and renewal, knowing that the best was yet to come.